So, Jerry, welcome to the Prosperous Musician. Thank you so much for coming on the show. So let's go back to the beginning. So, Jerry Goldstein, you were in the music industry, and you were kind of a music booker. That's your kind of background. So, just talk
Yeah.
to me how you got started in music.
I started by working for my student activities advisor as her assistant, and she was the person that programmed all the concerts and coffee houses and festivals, and I was her student aide, and I produced the posters for all of the events. And when I graduated from the 2 year college and went to my 4 year college, I got involved with student activities again and was the assistant to the coffee house manager at the time. And then I took over from her to become the coffee house manager and renovated the coffee house and did a whole lot of marketing and a whole lot of other things with the actual physical location of the coffee house and started booking artists, a lot of them from the New York City coffee house scene, and just took charge of working with artists. And since they were coming to my coffee house in upstate New York, there were a number of other colleges around the area. So I started to help them out by getting them gigs at some of the other colleges so that they can come to my place and then have a little tour in upstate New York. And once that got going, I started finding a number of artists that I was booking that I thought might be able to use some help doing their scheduling. And I signed up with a couple of the artists that I had booked into the coffee house and eventually ended up doing booking and management for about 5 artists over the course of my time doing booking, which was about 20 years worth of doing booking and management and publishing. Also got involved with a couple of the artists that I published their materials. And during that time, went to major conferences, booked tours in Europe and in the South Pacific for one of my artists, and for Canada and the US, and actually served as road manager for a number of those tours, riding with them, booking the tour and managing the whole shebang. It gave me a lot of experience with all aspects of doing a managing a performer's career.
Right, and is this in Canada? Did you say you're
Yep,
in Canada? Yeah.
I went to lots of conferences in Canada, did numerous tours in Canada with my artist and in conjunction with Canadian artists, and did a lot of work with the Canadian folk festivals as well as Canadian booking conferences. And actually, after that, and after I shifted my career to be doing presentations and lectures and workshops, I presented a lot of workshops for Canadian arts councils, the arts councils in Ontario and the arts council in British Columbia. So I've I've quite enjoyed a lot of my visits to Canada.
So if I was, let's say, if I'm watching this, I'm a singer-songwriter. I've had some gigs. The COVID thing's wiped all the live stuff out. I
Right.
maybe got an album, and I've got a little bit of a fan base.
Sure.
So what would I do? What's the kind of the best
Right.
strategy, if you like, um, for these times?
Right. So, first thing I would say, and I've said this to a lot of my clients, is to go back through all the gigs that were canceled, because a lot of the artists think, oh, they're canceled, we're done, enough. But what I think that is very important is for you as the artist to remain connected with any of those venues. And I would go back to them, all of the ones that were canceled, and just check in with them. Just see how they are doing. What are they doing? A lot of the venues, being that now it's 6 months into this COVID thing, we've had a lot of venues trying new things. A lot of artists are very creative. They've set up studios in their living rooms, in their bedrooms, wherever, and are doing the live streaming. But some artists are also recording uh, their performances. And the other piece of the puzzle is to step back and take a look at your materials. What have you got going on right now? What is your website like? What is your promotional material like? Do you have anything that you could do that perhaps you haven't done before that utilizes all of your talents? So the biggest thing is to dig down deep and take a look at, well, who are you as an artist? What else have you got going on? Could you do a workshop? Could you do an online course that demonstrates some technique that you've learned over the course of your experience with your particular instrument? Can you teach vocal lessons? Can you teach something? Can you create something that can be an additional stream of income even when we come back to doing things live and performing live again? So that's one of the things I think artists have to be aware of. How can they retrofit what they do now and what they are able to do with their all of their talents so that they're not just being a one stream of income artist. So that would be the first tidbit. And going over your materials, your website, your promo, can you then add a tab on your website that actually talks about this new stream of income possibility, the new options that you have? Many artists are now offering live shows for when you can do a live show and a streaming show. Maybe that streaming show is partially pre-recorded with a little live intro and a live outro, maybe a Q&A at the end of it. So what can you do and then how can you talk about it on your website or on your social media platforms to let people know that you've got more going on than just the live show? So that would be
Mhm.
tip one.
That's great. Is there anyone you can think of at the moment that's really made that sort of pivot, that shift in a successful way? They've gone from like being live to doing stuff on stream and doing the kind of things you're talking about.
Well, I have a number of my clients that are working with. I think I mentioned to you this platform called Ecamm, and using that, they have shifted and are presenting library concerts, school concerts. Some of the smaller venues are starting to do some of that and invite them to do a live stream sandwiched between an intro, uh, sandwiching around a pre-recorded performance that took place whenever it took place. So I have like three or four artists, and even one of my clients, a children's artist, who has been doing author visits with schools and libraries in this same manner, doing it Zoom meetings and charging for it, not doing free stuff, but actually getting some fees. So the other thing that some artists are starting to do are thinking of who their audience is and possibly writing songs for their clients. Using your talents in any way that you can and offering some new options to the people that are on your mailing list. But of course, that means you have to understand who your people are, who is on your mailing list, and getting a really deep connection to the people that you are serving. The people that you email all the time. Who are they, and what are their needs, and what can you offer them that maybe it's a anniversary live streaming concert for a special event for either a personal relationship or a business relationship. It takes, this time has been a thoughtful time where artists are reconfiguring who they are and who they serve and what do they serve with. And I think that that's been a good thing. I mean, it's not what we all want, but it gives you options. And I think that the venues are also at this point, they're ready, they're anxious to open, but they're ready to try some other things that perhaps bring a band in, or an artist into their venue where they have all the good sound, the lighting, no audience, and then they live stream from there, or they record from there and then post it in some way. So and still charging a ticket price, of course. So there's a lot of, there's even Zoom meetings that are going on that are live Zoom concerts that people are charging a good ticket price, like 25 bucks a pop, and the audience shows up, they buy their ticket, the artist, it's up to them to have good sound and lighting for their presentation. But then you get to see the full breadth of all the audience members there, and the host turns the audio on for all the audience members, and they get to clap, and you have an interactivity going, so it's like you are doing a live show. And so there's a lot of interesting, innovative things that are using the technology, but starting to pop up, and so that we can continue even though it's not the same.
I mean, even before the COVID, being a musician nowadays is a lot of work, and a lot of it is administrative. It's done in your office. It's not really the being on the stage bit. That's a very small part of it nowadays.
Correct. Right.
So, at what point do you get help? Do you hire other people
Right.
to do all this for you, when you can focus on the vision, on the as you talked about earlier, the writing the new material,
Right.
seeing what kind of skills you've got?
Well, I think the first thing that any artist often would come to me, I need an agent. That's like their first thing, even before they've gotten any audience or have any demand out in the marketplace. And it's always this sense of giving over the thing you hate to do most, the booking, the calls, the putting up with rejection on the phone and not knowing who to call, where to call. That's always the first thing somebody wants to hand over to somebody else. And yet, if you examine the agencies that would be likely to take some new person on, they really require that you are earning at least $50,000 in performance income before taking on a new client, because it costs them money. So, knowing that information, any artist would be, it would benefit them to understand that they need to build up to a certain place until they can even think about trying to get somebody else to do it for them. So the biggest thing that, if you are having trouble doing all that stuff, there are platforms out there that might be able to replace the day-to-day remembering I've got to send an email to this person. And one of those platforms that I know of is Mago Talent, that is like a contact relation management platform that might help an artist manage the nitty gritty, but you still have to learn how to put all that stuff in there. The other possibility is to find an assistant. Rather than move to, oh, I need a booking agent, move to finding somebody to help you as an assistant. I used to have an assistant for 3 days a week, 3 hours a day, and they did certain things that were not the income producing things, but the peripheral things. The management of the website, the social media, the interview setting up, the PR aspects, the mailing of contracts. But then I did the phone calls and the booking, the income producing things. And so I think that if artists think in that way of separating out what do I need to keep charge of, even though that income producing thing is a hard thing. But if you take away all the other things that are distracting you and are taking time away from you doing the thing that brings you income, then you at least have freed up some of that time. And the other piece of the artistic puzzle that I always talk to my clients about is start your day, pick the time of day that you are the most creative, and block off that time of day to do your creative work. And once you've done your creative work, your rehearsal, your practice, your writing, your creating, writing songs, whatever, then set it up. Don't have the day be like an 8 hour day where you're just doing that, but then schedule in time to do the business stuff, but after you've done your creative stuff. So you feel good about yourself. So you feel good about this is who I am as a person. I am a creative person. I just did my creative stuff. So now I can go do my business stuff because now I feel good about myself as that artist. And I think a lot of artists lose themselves either in just doing the creative and hoping they can dump all the other stuff on someone else, or just doing the business and then feel like, oh man, I haven't picked up my guitar this week or this month, and that's not a balance. And so I think that that's a really important thing. And just one other point is like, if you are going to get somebody to help you, don't dump, delegate. You have to be a partner with whomever you're working with to be assigning them. If you get an assistant, you have to come up with a plan. You have to give them assignments. You have to have a check in, give them assignments on Monday, check in the next Monday, what happened, what do we need to do, what didn't happen, and be in charge. Don't dump it on someone because it's not going to work. It's your career. Nobody else can fly in and go, oh, I think I'll do this for you. They have to be instructed because you and you know your career and you know what you would like to have happen. So you have to delegate and you have to be a partner, even if you have an agent. Even if you get an agent, you have got to create a system of communication. So you're not left wondering after a year, hey, how come I only got one gig? I mean, I've seen it happen and it's frustrating. So you can't just let somebody else take charge of your career. You have got to partner with them and manage them and manage a communication system so you are in charge or at least a partner in that process.
That's a good definition of having like a monetary figure per year. I mean, that really helps to say, well, yeah, if I'm not hitting that 50,000, I guess that's in the States. Obviously, the equivalent is somewhere else. But if I'm not hitting that, if I'm not getting a decent full-time living, then an agent's not really going to do much for me, or they're not even really going to look at you because of
Right.
obviously they've got to do a lot of work and
Right.
investment and they might not get it back. So very
Well,
much
I mean,
like a record label, I'd imagine nowadays,
yeah.
you've got to
I
have
mean,
an
when you think
audience.
about,
Yeah.
yeah, when you think about a commissionable situation,
Mm.
you're making $300 and that agent is going to get 10, 15, or 20%. Well, that's not a whole lot. When you start to make five, $1,000, $1,500, $2,500, $5,000, then there's something for them to count on. So until you can build up your financial income base, it's not very much for somebody to take on that you're hoping that they're going to do all this work, make all these phone calls on your behalf when you don't have a demand for what you're offering. So create the demand, build your audience, and go to an agency when the time is right with valuable asset that you're bringing to them. So
So everyone's zigging on social media. Is there a zag to be had offline that people are missing?
I I focus a lot of my work on helping artists find and create niche target markets, niche audiences that they have determined to be something that they have an affinity with. For example, if you at one point in your life you might have done another job, or at one point in your life you, or even now, you have certain hobbies or interests that you care about, or certain affiliations with either religious organizations or other kinds of affiliations that within the context of who you are as a person, you have particular interests or experiences. When you dig down deep and find a an affinity with that kind of an audience, you can open up a whole new portion of your career. And I think that artists who are doing that are moving out of the so-called mainstream of performance, but finding and discovering an audience, one that's willing to pay, an audience that cares about what you have to give to them and what you have to offer, and you become sort of this star, but also the only one that these folks know because you're not in a competitive, crowded market that there's 1,000 million other singer-songwriters. Now you're the only one they know of, and they go to you, and then they have their bubble, their chapters, or like for example, if you were a group doing, let's just say the ASPCA, like dog care and pet care, and you found your way into that particular niche for some reason. Well, there's lots of those organizations all around the world. And so all of a sudden you have a platform that you can become recognized and do something in the state of Vermont and then the state of California, and then because there are those organizations in Canada, in around the world. So I always use the phrase, narrow your focus to expand your audience. Because when you home in on a niche market, you think, oh, but that's just so small. But in reality, it is much bigger than you saying. I often ask artists, so who likes your music or your performance or your art? And if they answer everybody would, then I know they have not done the work to dig down to really understand who their audience is. Because that's not true. Whatever genre you're doing, if you're doing bluegrass or blues or jazz or hip hop or rap, it doesn't matter what your genre. There's going to be the people that love it, and there's going to be the people that don't particularly care about it, and you've got to find out why the people love it, and go directly to them. But you might be able to also find an audience who are not particularly genre focused, but are entertainment for some sort of need. Maybe they're doing a benefit, and your music helps them to raise their money. And it doesn't matter. You could be bluegrass, you could be jazz. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do, as long as you have some kind of affinity with what they're doing and can talk to their audience. So you open up a whole new market for yourself, and there's no competition. That's the beauty of those niche markets is there is no one else doing what you're doing because they haven't discovered your market.
I was
Like,
listening to one of your podcasts
oh,
recently, and they were talking about the college market and the conference market and things like that. So, can we expand a little bit on that?
I view the college market not so much as a particular niche, but as an entity unto itself. And the college scene has a variety of opportunities for any artist. One being through the student activities arena, which is where I entered the whole scene. The other, on many college campuses, they have performing arts centers, and so that those bookers in the performing arts centers would be booking larger acts that might be more theater and dance and performing arts oriented as opposed to popular music oriented large concerts that the concert committee might do. But then there's this whole other aspect to a college campus that are the departments, music department, history department, English department, all these different departments that often will use entertainment as a lecture, concert lecture, master class. So this is the area where I would say that artists need to dig down deep to see, well, okay, so you play jazz and you play a particular kind of jazz. Well, can you do a master class on exactly what you do and how you do what you do to help teach the students who are in the jazz music department something new, something cool? So that's what, that's the way I look at the college market. Different from a niche market, which might be that perhaps let's say you used to be a psychologist, just or maybe you still are and you play music on the side. Well, if you tap into the psychology connections that you have, they all have conferences. They all have meetings together. Or on campus, there might be the psychology department. Perhaps whatever you do as a musician can tap into aspects of that audience so that you can have the insider scoop to talk about what you do in a way that only they understand because you're talking their language, and that's that building of an affinity. So that's the difference that I see between um, a type of venue that you play and a specific targeted niche market.
Yeah, it sounds, when you look at it like that, that there's so much untapped things out there. Like, so, as you said, most people just tend to focus on um, entertainment venues,
Right.
which are crowded, I guess. Everyone goes there. So it's trying to find the places where, as you said, you can be the big fish in the small pond
Right.
um, and be the dominant force in that kind of area, whatever it is. But
Right.
so it's a great way of approaching it from your own interests and looking at it that
Why
way.
not? I
Mm,
mean, why not be happy while you're doing what you're doing
mm.
this work? And if you really care about, I don't know, fishing or golf or skiing, that could be one entree point into venues that cater to people that also care about fishing or golfing or skiing. It's not mainstream, but there's still people. There's still people who might buy your CD. There's still people looking for entertainment value. It just may not be in the club or the venue, but rather, I also look at this niche market thing as go to where people are already gathered. So, one of the things that just influenced me to discover this whole music thing was when I was in my first 2 years of college, I was inundated one week with folk music, with traditional styles of folk music placed in my biology lab, in the library, in various places on campus that I just kept bumping into performances. You couldn't avoid it. And it it drove my interest so that I went to the event that was eventually held at night in the student activities, all purpose room. But had I not bumped into that music in places that you would never expect to find music, I might not never have discovered this whole genre of music that just intrigued me. I had never heard. I was into rock and roll and Broadway shows, and I had never heard string band music and jug band music and the Georgia Sea Island singers and all these very traditional musics that were kind of in my face. And so I have adopted that throughout my career as doing music and presenting music to do promotional events so that they're in your face, they're in your way, so that they intrigue you and that they drive you, motivate you to go to the actual event. And I think that that's part of the thing of go where do put the music or put the art where people are already gathering so that you don't have to rely on ticket sales necessarily to have somebody come see you specifically, you know, because that's hard to do and when there's so much competition. But if you are part of an event already happening and they can't avoid seeing you because you're there, at the lunchtime meeting of the insurance agents of that city. You get to be the entertainment that they just fall in love with. Not because they're jaded, not because they're jazz aficionados, not because they like this particular or that particular kind of music, but because you're there, you're entertaining, and they have lunch. And so then you make new friends and create a whole new genre of audience and have the possibility of creating an avenue for your material, like your CDs or whatever, your books, whatever you're selling, by talking to the organizers of that event to maybe do a bulk sale as opposed to individual sales. And all of a sudden, you just sold 100 CDs. Maybe you sold them for $10 instead of 15 or 20, but you sold 100, not one. There's lots of additional benefits that you have to think about to add income streams to your career.
Playing music where people are. I mean, that could also be street performing, right? So if there's
Right.
people on the
Oh,
street and there's no one, a lot of venues are closing down. There's live
right,
music's not allowed. You can still play music on the street where people are, right?
right. So one of the beauties about busking uh, is that yes, you can play, and there have been like the New York City subway. There's a whole cultural aspect to that where they have taken that very thing and they're hiring musicians to actually be in the subway to perform, and so they're getting paid, but they're also able to make, busking tips, whatever. But if you're going to do that, one of my clients did a brilliant analysis one summer or a couple of summers in Boston where they were busking. And they made a spreadsheet of all the places that they busked and the traffic patterns, the numbers of CDs they sold, the time of day, the time of the season, from like May, June, whatever the month was, and analyze that so that the next year they only went back to the best places instead of instead of just doing all of it. And they just homed in on those best places and increased their time and income exponentially by having that systematic approach to doing it as opposed to just standing on any old corner.
Yeah, I mean, it's I've done that myself, and yeah, you do start to pick up certain places have a lot better footfall, and you just get
Right.
a better response. And it literally is can sometimes be a matter of meters. You know, it's not different town. It could be literally a few meters that way is better
Right.
than a few meters that way. It's
Exactly.
really yeah,
Exactly. But
and
understanding that and tracking it and making sure that you remember it, can make a difference in the income that you have.
yeah, and certainly time of day. You know, some places in the day
Right.
are very, not great, but if you
Right.
go there at 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, it's alive, and,
Right.
it's a
Right.
totally different crowd because the crowd are out. They want to be entertained. They've got money in the pocket. They're relaxed. They're not
Exactly.
in work
Rushing for
mode.
work. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that makes a huge difference as well.
Totally, totally. So, but understanding that and being aware of that and having a better sense of, are you interfering or adding, and do you need any kind of licensing? Because there are some cities that you need to have a merchant license to busk, and some cities you don't, but some of them you do. So, I would encourage you to check that out wherever you end up deciding that this is going to be my town.
I just had a great idea, which doing that on High Street is um, talking to different shops and maybe writing jingles or adverts for those kind of shops, and you're playing them in the street.
There you
You know,
go.
it's like standing there with a board, like some
Right,
people do that. So
right.
why not do an audio version of it?
And get paid by the shop. Your new your new career.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first, but you've just given it away, but
Yeah.
no reason to not give it a whirl. I mean, the the folks that are trying to run businesses also are needing to think about additional ways of getting the word out to where the people are. And so that's where I think some in that idea that you just had is in some way a form of sponsorship, and where you can talk to a business and say, "Oh, I'm here at this very hot spot at X time of day, and I have determined that I make some good money here and there's good traffic. Let me do this song for you. You pay me, you sponsor, and then I can put a sign out saying this busking performance is sponsored by such and such store."
I think, especially nowadays, I think there might be more of an appetite for that.
Because everybody's looking for new ways to get the
Mm,
word out and be seen and be appreciated to reach new audiences. So that's another whole avenue.
what are the main points of a good marketing plan?
I always think about a career in 2-year blocks as opposed to right now and, have to do something for next week. So if you have a career that is set up so you're looking at 2 years into the future and planning during those 2 years, that's step one to involve any kind of marketing, because when you know what your plan is, are you going to be touring in the Southeast? Are you going to be touring in Europe? When are you going to be doing that? What are the materials you need for that time frame? What kinds of places are you going to be trying to tour to? What kinds of places are you going to be trying to do online? How are you incorporating those things? Then you have a better plan of action to create any marketing, any interview schedules when you have the ability to look that far out. Because marketing is not necessarily just um, sending out your emails and telling people every single time, I'm going to be playing here, I'm going to be playing here, buy my CD. It's how are you communicating, and what are your social media communications like? Is there a cohesive campaign? Are you doing a thematic tour, whether it's online or live? Do you have a theme to it? Does it have a name? Have you given your performances or your programs names? because one of the things that artists tend to think about is, Joe Smith in concert. Well, Joe Smith may not be known, Jane Smith may not be known, but something that you do, jazz in the 40s and 50s, guitar styles from the 30s and 40s, or Django Reinhardt guitar styles, or something that might be interest point. If you give your stuff a name, name your programs and create programs, and maybe you have a huge list of material and maybe you're doing a variety of material. Well, if you gang them together and coordinate so that thematically it fits into a program, and thematically you can say, okay, now I'm doing, certain kinds of music from the 60s, or certain, if you're doing tribute bands, you're doing this particular person or that particular band. If you organize it so that it's of interest, then it's marketable by the buyer. That's the person you have to think about, or the organization you have to think about. You know, it's harder to sell Joe or Jane Smith than it is to sell the American Songbook. Having that title gives buyer, the buyer of you, the artist, the ability to market to their audience. And so the biggest marketing thing I think that any artist can adopt is to understand who are they marketing to and what are the needs of that end user or end buyer to help me, to help them sell themselves so that the buyer can sell them to their audience. And most artists don't think that far down the line, don't think they don't get into the head of the buyer, because that's who needs to be, the thought process needs to be about how is the buyer going to sell me and what are my materials that help them sell me to their audience. And that's a really important perspective for any artist to adopt when writing their material, when thinking about where are they going to, place public service announcements or press releases, or what materials the buyer has to use to then do their marketing.
Yeah, I think having a longer term approach is a good idea. I mean, it's very common to have the short term, isn't it? To just think
Yeah.
of a week or a month ahead, and
And as this COVID thing has shown us, all of that is great, and then you may have to shift. But if you have the ability to think in that way, then that shift is much easier than to start from scratch and be like, oh, now what do I do? If you are thinking, okay, well, what's going on in the heads of all of those venue owners? What are they dealing with? And how can I help them deal with their current programming challenges? I think that that's a good question, because then it opens up the possibilities for what's going on, that what's going on that might go on. But as long as you're asking yourself that question, how can I help them deal with their programming challenges? You can then find out, well, what are their programming challenges today? What are their programming challenges for the next 6 months? You'll be able to move in that conversation so much more easily if you have that question in mind, as opposed to how am I going to get booked? You're going to get booked by being adaptive and helpful to those bookers in some way, shape, or form. Maybe you are a performer that performs certain kind of ethnic music or performance, and the programmers in that you're trying to reach have not been able to reach that particular kind of audience in their community. Well, maybe you can solve their dilemma by being that presenter, that performer that helps them reach this unique audience. And because you've got all your stuff together about how you reach that audience, because you are of that audience, you know them, then you can be of help to them. So thinking about that from that perspective, how can I help you? How can I help you solve your programming challenges addresses a lot more.
Well, it's Jerry. It's been great talking to you, and I know there's tons more in your book about
Oh,
being your own booker and booking shows and marketing and all the rest of it. We've just barely touched the surface here, and you've got a
yeah,
lot of experience. Um, and who knows, maybe we can get you on again and we can talk about something else in a bit more
sure,
detail. But it's
sure,
been great hearing, particularly about the marketing ideas and the
sure.
yeah, just simply offering offering solutions rather than
There you go.
waiting for someone to sort of pick you out of obscurity. And thank you. Thanks for being on the Prosperous Musician. And I'll see you again soon. And just before you go, would you like to where else can we find out more about you?
Oh,
Where are you
sure.
online?
My very large and busy website is performingbiz.com. And I've just started a new podcast called Get Great Gigs. Even now, there is still possibilities for getting great gigs, and that's at getgreatgigs.com. And the podcast is available on almost all the podcast platforms: Apple Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. I mean, they're all over the place, and those are a lot of interviews that I'm doing with industry professionals and other artists who are doing some of these niche programs. And so you'll find out a lot of information about from executive directors of various organizations, the college market. I think you listened to that one with Eric Lambert from Association of for the promotion of campus activities. And just today, one of my former clients who is doing a unique niche market that she totally created on her own just came out today. And so that's one of the projects that is happening in my world.
Great. So, and you're on you're on Facebook and things like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah, Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter.
great.
But you can find out all of that both on the getgreatgigs.com and also on the performingbiz.com websites. And I'm doing coaching and online courses, and there's lots of free articles. Maybe you've discovered some of that there, and lots of information on how to work with agents, how to work with managers, and of course my book, which you had a sneak preview of how to be your own booking agent. And it's been a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you. Likewise. And thanks again,
Thanks,
Jerry.
Spence.
And
Yep, you bet.
yeah, we'll stay in touch.
You bet.
See you again.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye bye.